Hello, this is Rusty Williamson with another cool tutorial. Today we'll be going over the 12 effects in After Effects that are used for FX. We'll get right to it. We'll create a new composition. We'll call it Explode. It can be 1920 by 1080 square pixels, 24 frames a second. Make it 3 seconds long. Our first effect is Fractal Noise. These effects are arranged in the way I'm going to demonstrate them, but even if it was the most important effect first, Fractal Noise would probably be at the top. Fractal noise can be used for skies, clouds, lava, fire, explosions, smoke. It can be used to create the surface of the sea, be used for display maps, shatter maps, and the list goes on. There is a sister effect called Turbulent Noise, and it's actually the newer effect. Fractal Noise has been around for a long time. I've been using it for at least 18 years. Turbulent Noise is supposed to be the newer, improved version. Turbulent Noise uses less CPU, less memory, and it renders supposedly nicer. And it does. It's a cleaner render. But I haven't gotten used to it yet. I've been using Fractal Noise so long, I know what it does. Turbulent Noise is something new to me, and I haven't figured out quite what to do with it yet. Anyway, we'll add a solid. We'll call it Noise. And we'll add the effect Fractal Noise. Now I'm using a little plug-in here from Video Copilot, and it's free to add these effects. If you don't have this, you'll need to go over to your effects and presets and enter the search terms I enter, and then scroll down looking for the effect, and then just drag it and drop it on to the screen. So every time you see me do something like this and enter some kind of effect, go over to your effects and presets and enter it there and look for the effect. Or download the Video Copilot FX Console plugin. Alright, so here we have Fractal Noise. And there are many different fractal types to choose from, with many different looks. We'll choose Dynamic Progressive. Below that, you can invert it. You can also choose the noise type, but I'm not going to go into that. You can invert it, which gives it a totally different look sometimes. You can up the contrast, which we'll do a little to make sure we have some blacks in there. And then you can down the brightness next, and we'll do that just a little bit. We won't go into overflow. Usually I leave it as is and it works fine. In the transform properties, you can rotate it. You can scale it, and we'll scale it down to maybe 70 or 80. The offset turbulence allows you to move from side to side and up and down. You can adjust the complexity, and you can go into the subsettings, which I'm not going to do. I'm going to point out the main thing with Fractal Noise, and that's the evolution dial. This is the main way to animate it. And the primary way to animate it, you could do it with keyframes, is using a simple expression. You would alt-click on the time clock and enter time times 350 or some number of your choosing, and then click away. Don't hit enter after entering an expression, or you'll be put on a new line to enter yet another expression. Alright, let's see what we have. That looks pretty good. There's the secondary way to animate fractal noise is using the offset turbulence. If we alt-click on the offset turbulence, we can do the same thing almost. In the case of offset turbulence, you have two values and you have to specify both values. And the way you do that is inside square brackets separated by a comma. So we would enter open square bracket 0 for the first value, since we don't want to go side to side, comma the next value, time times 350 again, and then close the square brackets. Click away. Now let's see what we have. Alright, I think our fractal noise is going pretty good here. It's time for our next effect. The second effect is Tritone. We'll add the Tritone effect. Use Tritone to color just about anything. It allows you to color the highlights, and we'll make the highlights a bright yellow. Over here to yellow, and up there bright yellow. The midtones, which will change to a fiery orange, maybe a little more red. And we'll leave the blacks or the shadows alone. Tritone is a cool effect, and you've got to color your stuff, so it's a must. Our next effect is number 3 on the list is polar coordinates. Polar coordinates changes a circle into a rectangle or a rectangle into a circle. We won't apply the polar coordinates directly to this layer for reasons I'll point out in a minute. We'll instead use what's called an adjustment layer. Go up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, or conversely, just type in Control-Alt-Y. Once we have the adjustment layer, it will affect all the layers below it. We only have our noise layer below it, but that's all we wanted to affect right now. We'll add the effect polar coordinates. Now we have a rectangle going to a circle, so we will change the type of conversion from polar to rectangle to polar, and then we will change the interpolation all the way up to 100. And bingo, we have a circle. If we play it, we can see that now we have our fractal noise coming from the center, which might be what you want for some reason. And we have a perfect circle. There is one flaw, though. We have a seam going up here, which is why we placed this effect on an adjustment layer. To fix that seam, we need to go to our noise layer, hide our adjustment layer, so we're back to looking at our fractal noise. Then we need to add another adjustment layer above the noise, and to that adjustment layer, add the effect offset. Now the seam we're getting is from our edges. Our edges don't line up. So we're going to take our first number, which is side to side, and shift it to the right until that seam is in the center. Then we're going to zoom out using the mouse wheel, select our rectangle tool, and draw a mask around the seam. Now the mask is automatically set to add, so we'll still see our seam. We have to go down here and change it from add to subtract. And then finally we need to push the F key and feather our mask out, about 70. Now, if we click down here so we don't see our mask anymore. And we re-enable our top adjustment layer. Jump out the full screen again by pushing question mark. We see that our seam is gone. And we have a perfect circle with fractal noise coming from the center. I'm not sure what you would use that for, but it's something to note. Let's say you wanted fractal noise, a full screen of fractal noise coming from the center. Well, all we'd have to do is scale this up until it fills the screen. But what do we scale up? Not our noise layer and not our adjustment layers. We want to scale the whole thing up. Well, what we need to do here is to pre-compose so that we get a layer that has all these layers within it. Pre-compose, hold down Control, Shift, and press C. We'll call this Circle. We'll press OK. Now we can press S for scale and scale it up until it fills the screen. Now let's see what we've got. Let's say for some reason you want the fractal noise inside a shape that's oval and pulsating. Well, a particle system could do that for you. Now, if we apply the particle system directly to this fractal noise layer, it will we'll only be able to see the particle layer. We'll no longer have our fractal noise. So we're going to have to add it to a new layer. So we're going to create a new solid. Control Y. And we'll call this solid Particles. To this layer, we'll add the effect CC Particle World. There are actually 3 particle systems that come with After Effects: CC Particle World, Particle Playground, and CC Particle Systems 2. All of them have their different attributes. All of them have their different properties that can be adjusted, and each have their strengths and weaknesses. Now, we can't see what we're doing at the moment because of our fractal noise, so we're going to hide our circle layer and advance the time head to so we can see what we're doing. We're going to come down to our physics, change the gravity to 0, and this makes the particles spread out in all directions. Then we're going to put the time frame so we can see the particles, and we're going to reduce the longevity until all the particles are in the frame. Like that. Then we're going to close the physics, open up the particle properties, change the particle type. You have lots of particle types here, but we're going to go to Faded Sphere. We're going to up the birth rate until the solid forms in the center. We're going to up the death rate until the outside becomes solid. Now let's see what we have. All right. We need to down the longevity a little bit more. Something like that. Now that's like a wobbling circle we have here. and we wanted an oval, so that's time for our next effect. Our fifth effect is Bezier Warp. We'll add the Bezier Warp effect directly to our particle layer. And we'll zoom out using our mouse wheel. And we see that the Bezier Warp gives us these Bezier handles we can adjust. So we can deform any object. This can be used with Fractal Noise, can be used with anything. And we'll just make this sort of like an oval, since that's what we wanted, was an oval. Oops, undo. There, that's a pretty good oval. Let's see what we've got. All right. We'll click away, so our Bezier handles no longer show. We'll hit question mark to zoom to full screen. And we'll re-show our circle Fractal Noise. And we'll set the track mat. If you don't see the track mat, hit the toggle switches and modes till you see it. And we'll set this to alpha matte particles. Now we see what we've got. Looks pretty good, but it's moving pretty fast, which brings us to our next effect, Timewarp. Use Timewarp when you want to speed things up or slow things down. Our number 6 effect is a little bit of a problem, though. Do we add it to our particles or do we add it to our circle? We want to add it to the whole effect. We could pre-compose, but this time we'll put an adjustment layer at the top. That's Control Alt Y. And into that adjustment layer, we'll add the effect Timewarp. We'll set the speed to 30. And let's see what we've got. All right, more or less what we wanted, if we wanted anything. I don't know what this is. And since we don't know what this is, why don't we blow it up into 100 million pieces? The way you do that is the Shatter effect. Number 7 effect is Shatter. Now, where do we apply it? We run into the same problem again. We're going to have to pre-compose because we want to apply the Shatter effect to everything. Can't just apply it to one layer. So, Control Shift C. We'll call this blob. So it looks sort of like a blob. And now we can add the Shatter effect. Back at the frame 0. And search for the Shatter effect. When you first invoke the Shatter effect, you're faced with a brick wall with a wagon wheel in front of it. The bricks represent the shapes that your object will be shattered into. And the wagon wheel represents what part will be shattered and what part will be left. What we want to do is change the shape, so we'll open the shape properties, change the shape from bricks to glass. We'll up the repetitions so that we have smaller pieces. All right. Then we'll go up and we'll change the view from wireframe and forces to rendered. And let's see what we've got. pretty good. But they're all falling downward now because I forgot to go into the physics properties and change the gravity to 0. Now let's see what we've got. Looks pretty good. But all these shapes are looking too square to me. So we're going to deform them a little bit using effect number 8, Turbulent Displace. Turbulent Displace can be added to anything, and it's just great. An awesome effect. Now we'll up the amount of turbulent displacement to 80, and we'll, because our little pieces are small, we'll down the size to 10. There, that kind of warps them all and puts them a little bit more random shape. Now we'll alt-click the evolution and type in time times 350. And let's see what we've got. Better. Okay, what we'll do now to explore our next effect is come up to our blob and double click on it to open our blob composition. Then we'll select all the layers and pre-comp again, Control-Shift-C, and we'll call this blob. And then we'll add an effect, our 10th effect, no, our 9th effect, Roughen Edges. We'll advance it so we can see it. Now it's changed the edges, obviously. Roughen Edges affects the edges. And it's changed them from fading out to a rough sort of edge. We'll change the edge type from roughen to spiky. And then we'll alt-click the evolution, and as usual, enter time times some value, and we'll just use 350 again. Now let's see what we've got. All right, our roughen edges has changed the edges and done nothing to the center. But we want to change the center. So that brings up our 10th effect, Displacement Map. We'll add the effect Displacement Map. Now the Displacement Map's not going to do anything until you give it a map to work with. So what we'll do is create a new solid, Control-Y. We'll call this map. Say OK. And we'll add the effect Fractal Noise. We'll up the contrast until we have some blacks, because we need blacks in this. There. We'll open the transform properties. Down the scale to perhaps 27 or so. Then we'll alt-click the evolution and enter our favorite formula, time times 350. Favorite expression, I should have said. All right, let's see what we've got. That should work out nicely. All right, we will go back to our blob layer, and where it says Displacement Map layer, we'll specify map, and then we will hide our map because we no longer need to see it. For the source, we will specify effects and masks. And then we'll up the horizontal displacement and up the vertical displacement. Now let's see what we've got. Alright, so now we've changed the middle using a displacement map. Now what we're going to do is create a new composition. Go up to Composition, New Composition. Say OK. Then we'll go to our Project panel and we'll find our Explode and drag it into the new composition. And we'll drag our blob into the new composition. Now let's see what we've got. I dragged the wrong blob in there. Delete that layer and grab the other blob. I shouldn't have named them the same. Error. Alright, now let's see what we've got. So we've combined these in a new composition, these two compositions. And we have the Explode and our blob of light. Let's click on the blob of light and add our 11th effect, curves. One of the most useful effects around. I use it every time. There's no way I get around not using it. You can adjust the different channels. The RGB channel, the red, the green, the blue, and the alpha channel. Very useful. We're just going to use this to darken it. And we're not seeing it, so we'll solo it. We could lighten it, or we could darken it. I think we darken it. Something deep red. Then we'll click on the Explode and we'll unsolo that layer. So now we're seeing the Explode layer. And we'll add our 12th effect, an effect that's almost always used in everything, glow. Immediately it changes the look. We don't have to do anything to it. So now let's see what we've got. Alright, that concludes this tutorial. I hope you learned something. There are tutorials put out by different people on each of these effects that go into them in detail, and I recommend you visit these videos and absorb what they have to offer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.